Dear participants, welcome to this second lessons of the cycle of Masterclass on how to price the value of innovation in innovation partnership. It's a great pleasure to see you all again for this second session. We have also a few new participants that were not with us last time. So we see that this masterclass is a success, and we're very, very glad about it. So to start first, I will remember a few, some housekeeping rules to make sure that this masterclass goes smoothly. So please mute your microphone and switch off the camera, except for Philippe Portier, who is our speaker, of course. So to submit your question, we use the Slido application. You have here the code to join Slido. We will ask you to put your name when you ask the question, so we can identify yourself. And we will give you the floor during the masterclass in order to ask your question. If you have any technical problems, please use the chat. We'll make sure to answer your problem. And if before the end of this masterclass, some questions remain unanswered, we will try to collect them and to answer them after this masterclass. So the agenda will be quite short. It's going mainly the presentation of Philippe Portier's methodology about competitive pricing. Philippe Portier is an expert in open and collaborative innovation. He used to work as a professor at EM Lyon Business School. And with him, we will also discover this methodology of competitive price for innovation value, and how it helps facilitate the cooperation between buyers, public buyers, and the suppliers of innovative solutions. So please, Philippe, you can take the floor and start your presentation. And I just recall that in the chat, you will find the link to Slido. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them on Slido, and we will give you the floor. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Samira. Good morning and welcome to the participants to this very technical masterclass on a very technical topic: how to price the value of innovation in an innovation partnership. So maybe I have to share my slides first. Just a minute. So I would say in introduction that to assess the price of an innovation is not a new challenge for innovators, generally speaking. Yes, sure, it's quite difficult, but they are doing that daily. What is complex, in my opinion, is that IP has to take in account a key concern of European Union, that is, how could the final price of an IP be deemed free of state aid? And in other words, the question is not only to price the value of an innovation as such, but to implement effective and efficient methodologies preventing any doubt on undue subsidies from public buyers to selected suppliers of their choice. So, in my opinion, I would say that the question, we have to reframe the question. In an innovation partnership, how to price the value of innovation in order to maximize the likelihood the final price would be free of any state aid. So I think that it is the key point, the key issue we have to solve. All right, to address this issue, I propose to present to structure my presentation in 4 parts. One is a quick introduction in order to explain my understanding of the innovation partnership issues. And after that, I would try to propose first IP pricing formula, and in order to understand it clearly. And in the second part, to explain how to implement it. That I would say, what is the process of implementation of this pricing formula. And in conclusion, I would try to answer the initial question. Are we sure that this proposal is able to address European IP regulations? So in the beginning, maybe I would to insist, I would to focus your attention that on the fact that it's quite different from a standardized innovation process. Usually, a standardized innovation process is as a target with our customers. And here also, sure, the IP has the aim to beneficiate to final customers, but it could be citizens, it could be public servants, it could be users, it could be customers. It's not easy to identify them. Second difference of IP compared to innovation process usually implemented between suppliers and customers is that it's a public project. That means that it's not only I would say the managers of the companies that have to decide to risk or not some money, but public buyers have to optimize, I would say, the public money. Suppliers, yes, they want to get the opportunity to develop profitable new markets. And sometimes I am the feeling that some buyers forget that they are here to be to strengthen their competitive positioning, and not only to get the contract in order to say, all right, I get this contract. So if they don't reach this objective, they could say, all right, it's not so interesting to take the risk of an IP. So we have to take their expectation in consideration. And last but not least, European Union develops a lot of regulation in order to prevent any discriminatory procedures, and really it's quite complex compared to, I would say, the private situation between suppliers and customers. So the challenge is to design a process on methodology that could meet the expectation of these 4 stakeholders, and there are more than 4 in reality. So the European legal framework is a key point to solve. I just remind you the three main roots of this framework, according to my understanding. The first one is this quite difficult criteria, which is called market value, defined as the benefits received by the public purchaser and risk taken by the providers has to be paid through market value. How to meet this requirement? The second one is transparency on cost. It's a double proportionality test. Cost completion of R&D expenses, and more of that, cost proportionality between these expenses and the level, the degree of innovation. Even in private business, it's quite difficult to assess the proportionality at the starting point of an innovation path. At the end, maybe you can say, all right, we succeed or not, but at the beginning stage is quite difficult. And last, how to back, I would say, the dissemination of IPR, intellectual property rights, through publication, standardization, and so on, and the opportunity for public buyer to get an unlimited access to result free of charge. Normally, the aim of an innovator is to be the first mover and to try to be the winner, to fulfill this rule. The winner takes all. So it's a bit contradictory with the fact to motivate some suppliers to commit within IP. But as a matter of fact, it's a key point we have to address, how to meet this legal requirement from the pre-tender stage to the end of the contract. In order to address this issue, we propose an approach we call competitive pricing for innovation value. All right, maybe I have to explain what means competitive. Competitive is a mix between cooperation and competition. I would say that when a buyer is purchasing products on the shelf, standardized product, existing product, cooperation is not really necessary. Competition, it's a very good leverage in order to get the lowest price. But faced with uncertainty, which is, I would say, the essence of innovation, cooperation is quite vital. Is quite is necessary. But cooperation without competition is very dangerous. As a matter of fact, innovation is a competitive process between, I would say, the partners of innovation and external competitors. and they have to fight together against alternatives, potential alternatives coming from external competitors. So the experience, I would say, the business experience demonstrates that for innovation, for key factor of success of innovation is to commit stakeholders in cooperation and competition. And it's the reason why we call that co-competitive. Pricing and not price. Yes, why? Because price is just an output of pricing. What is key is how to price, is the process in order to get the best price. So the key point is not the result, is the process. And we propose a process of pricing, a pricing process, and not only how to calculate the price. For innovation value, all right, it's quite clear. It's very linked with innovation partnership, but it's not so easy to provide, to assess the value of an innovation at the beginning stage of the path, the innovation path. So all along, I would say, the process, the question is always the same. Do we deliver some value through the innovation we try to produce? And because we are living in a market without any reference, you know, solution as a reference, it's quite difficult to assess this innovation value. In order to present how to implement competitive pricing for innovation, the first step is to be clear about what kind of pricing formula we can use. So I apologize. We have some formula, but I try to simplify them as much as possible. So the key pricing formula used, I would say, by all companies is the following one. Price is equal first to fixed cost. Not only R&D costs, but in IP, industrialization fixed cost. That means machinery, plants, and so on, divided by expected sales volume. And sure, is not so easy to forecast these volumes. It's a key point, especially when fixed costs are very high in the total cost. This ratio is called economies of scale. And we add, like normally, variable cost. That means the cost of each product you sell, from the supply chain to the after sale. And these variable costs are not so easy to anticipate before the R&D step, but it's necessary to assess, to get to a target variable cost at the beginning of the process. And to this total cost, full cost, we had the margin, you know. Personally, I think that margin has to be identified as such, in order to be sure that it's profitable for suppliers, and also to discuss, I would say, is content. In my own practices, I consider that the margin has to pay for all financial costs. That means the cost of fixed and working capital, depending, I would say, on interest rates on the market. So the guarantee, the fact that the margin is guaranteed to suppliers is the key leverage to stimulate their commitment. On the right side, you can see an example. If the fixed costs are equal to 1 million and volumes, forecast volumes to 10,000, and the variable cost equal to 100 euro, with the contractual margin cost equal to 50% of the total cost, the price per unit will be equal to 300 euro per unit. All right, it's very simple. Second step is more complex. The aim of this second step is to include in cost, but separately, the risks. For example, you can say the target fixed costs are 1 million, but if we have to face some difficulties, maybe it could be increased about 200,000. It's exactly the same thing for volumes. You can say, all right, we expect to sell 10,000, but maybe we will sell only 8,000. So my advice is to identify and discuss the risk in order to include them on the total cost. Whatever, it's exactly the same thing for variable costs. For example, maybe raw materials will increase, or the price on the market of some purchases included in variable cost would increase, or so here also it would be necessary to identify the variable cost risk. The margin doesn't change, whatever the risk. I emphasize this point. Risk has to be included in cost, not in margin. But I think that we have to provide limitation in the cost assessment. And personally, I think that in such project like IP, risk should not overcome 20% of the total cost. Why? Because IP is a contract dedicated to technology readiness level quite mature, from technology ready level 4 to 5, and not for example, very exploratory technology readiness level like the step 1 or 2. So to commit in an IP needs to master, I would say, for example, roughly speaking, the technology in order to solve what is called the death desert, which in technology readiness level, which is the step 4 to 5. You can see same examples as the previous slide on the right, and you say that included risks, the price shouldn't overcome 405 euro per unit. So for me, I think that the key point is to define a price funnel with a minimum and a maximum, you say, in order to be sure that never you will be forced to face with a price which is not agreed at the beginning of the IP contract. And it is a key expectation of European Union. All right, so I would say the suppliers know the maximum price could be 400 euro. The target price is about 300. You could say, all right, I will do my maximum to be sure to be paid 400 euros. How to stimulate its commitment to reduce the risk and to reduce the cost. For that, we add to the price something which I'll call G. And G, it's a share incentive between the buyer and the supplier on cost savings. This is a very well-known formula used mainly, for example, by Toyota to stimulate its suppliers. So, in order to calculate this incentive, first we have to follow, to track the cost period by period. For example, here we have the cost of period N and fixed cost, variable cost, and volume, and we compare it with the cost of the next period. If the cost decrease, the supplier will receive an agreed percentage of these savings. Personally, in order to prevent any tricky negotiation, yes, its cost reduction is coming from me or you and so on. I lived such situations often. I think that to simplify the discussion, the agreement could be, all right, you take half of the cost savings, and as a buyer, we take half of this cost saving. And everybody has some interest to commit themselves in this cost reduction. For example, I take the same example as previously. So the fixed cost is initially the forecast was 1 million, but finally the suppliers and buyers succeed in reducing them about 200,000. That means to reach a final budget about 800,000. And the volumes, sales volumes, increased about 2,000 units. And the variable cost decrease about 20 euros. That means they come from 100 to 80 euros. The contractual margin remains the same, and the pricing incentive, as we have seen previously, is equal to 50. So we calculate this the final price as follows. First, we compare the initial cost to the year-to-date cost, and we share the difference by 2 in order to get to share these savings. What is key? Something is wrong. Just a minute. What is key is that the new price is calculated with the new cost, not the previous one. That means that the price itself decreased, and at this new diminishing price, we add the savings we have to pay to the supplier, and that means that the price should be 220 euro, and we add to this price the G incentive in order to pay for 246.66 euro per unit. This is a tremendous leverage in order to optimize jointly and continuously the cost without any discussion on the margin level. This is the key point we will see after that. Fine. Now, this simplistic formula, how to implement it through tender process. First, you know that nothing new under the sun. IP has to be prepared upstream by a pre-tender market study, benchmark, sourcing, and so on. After that, you have the tender process itself, which is quite complex due to the innovation. After the tender, you have the implementation of the IP itself, and I add time to market, because the aim of the IP is not only to industrialize, to do R&D in industrialization, but to use it, to sell it, to exploit it, So there is also cost in this moment. And you have the dissemination question after the IP through licensing and so on. In my opinion, that have to be included in the pricing formula. So price is not as such a question. The question is to build a pricing process from the pre-tender to the dissemination phase. Yeah. How to do that? I present here, I would say, the grid maybe that could be useful to use. Vertically, all right, you have the pricing formula simplified, the risk in order to simplify to ease the understanding are not included, but you know they have to be assessed. And finally, on the vertical, horizontal path, you have the different step of the process. So, as a matter of fact, if you take in consideration best practices within industry, this grid is open, you know, is used from the beginning of the process to the end of the process in order to manage, I would say, the life cycle of innovation all along its path from the idea to the end of life. So I would say a simple Excel sheet allows to do that, but one question, you know, is somewhere the continuity between each step and the fact that people, especially buyers, public buyers, are able to sustain, I would say, this continuous improvement of cost component from the pre-tender phase to the end of life of the solution, the service, or the product. And finally, price or pricing is like a golden thread which links all the IP steps. This is the aim of the methodology that I present. Now, the question is how to stimulate competition in order to be sure that all along the steps, the fixed cost will be optimized, the volumes also, the variable cost, and so on. We have always this same formula, and now the question, especially in the tender phase, is to compare the cost assessment of different suppliers. And I think that is nothing new for you. I just try to explain what you are doing daily. First, you try to identify the lowest cost each suppliers are able to provide, and to decide or to build a kind of target best price for value, which I would say accumulate the best cost of each supplier. Sure, we know that it's quite unrealistic hypothesis, but we need an hypothesis, and if possible, the more challenged one, in order to stimulate the supplier, asking them how they were able to, for example, for the supplier A, to propose so low fixed cost. On the other side, we have also, and you try to identify the highest cost. It could be also, it could have sense, it could be have some value. If supplier C, for example, propose so high fixed cost, maybe it could be justified. So we have to ask to each supplier the rationale of their cost. And yes, very normally, you can also identify the average between the highest and the lowest in order to position, each suppliers is cost suppliers compared to the other. Personally, I use the index methodology. That means that I don't give the absolute figures. I just say if the cost, the lowest cost has the index 100 and the highest has the index 0 and the average 50. And I give this information to the suppliers, saying them, all right, for example, supplier C, you have here the highest cost, index 0, the lowest cost in volume. That means that you expect to sell a lot of volumes. Why? Could you explain why? It's a very good idea, but at the same time, you have the highest cost for your margin. You ask for a margin of 100 or 200%. Why? And here you are in average in the, I would say, the formula of continuous improvement. The idea to anticipate to the results of continuous improvement, it's a key point in my opinion. It's a way to commit suppliers in this continuous improvement from the beginning of the contract and not during the contract itself. Sure, is it possible also to position the different, the other costs and to understand their rationale and to position globally the suppliers between them. For me, the first step of the process aimed at optimizing each cost component. The problem is not to select supplier. The problem is to assess best price for value, which is realistic and reachable, and compared to spec at the same time. This is the key point at the beginning. Is not to select suppliers, is to select cost structure. And after that, it could be possible to select suppliers themselves, depending on their ability to provide this cost breakdown. Do they agree on the target cost, and are they able to deliver this target cost depending on their resources, abilities, and so on. So, in my opinion, or for example, if we take some example industries, this need several roundtables. Normally, as minimum 3 roundtables for, I would say, the usual innovation. But for complex innovations, it could be necessary to make this roundtable 4 times, 5 times, 6 times if necessary. Why? Because, in innovation project, the main trap is to decide too soon. Normally, in decision making, the best practices require to decide only if you think you have enough information, taking in account the step to minimize risk decisions. So I would say that this process during the tender phase is key in order to design a realistic and ambitious IP from the beginning. But something which has to be said, that you can manage the same process even during the R&D step, industrialization step, or time to market, using benchmark, and maybe to use the most favored nation rule. That means that you include in the contract the fact to have the possibility to get a better product or a better technology outside if you think that the IP partner is not able to do that. Or other way to implement this most favored nation rule is to say that the supplier commit itself to try to develop the same innovation than the external competitors, for example, in a timelines of 6 months and 1 year. It depends on its complexity. That means that the competition is not only key in the tender phase, but has to be maintained and stimulated all along the IP steps itself. All right, I try to provide some example. The first one is a good one, you know, a successful one. Yes, it's just an example. Here you see on the left side the forecast, you know. So the forecast on R&D was that the budget is equal to 1 million with a risk of 200. And you see that the level of industrialization 900 and so on, distribution exactly the same thing. That means that initially the cost was high and it decreased. Exactly the same thing for the variable cost, which decreased from 120 to 85. I say that as a result of R&D, industrialization, and distribution. And finally, at the end of contract, you can see that the results are better than forecast. You know, the total fixed costs were around 686,000. The volumes increased by 2,000. So the fixed costs go down from 85 to 54. Same thing for variable cost. They decrease about 85 to 67. So the total cost decreased from 170 to 121. That means if you add to this new cost breakdown the same margin rate of 50%, that normally the price to pay is equal to 182. But because of the savings, you know, the difference between 170 and 121, 49 euro, you have to pay 25 euro more to the supplier in order to stimulate his commitment in these savings. So the final price will be equal to 260. This is quite interesting for not only for the buyer, sure. The net savings per unit is about 25 euro, and on the total budget, the savings are about 12%. But what is quite key is that the suppliers also get more margin in percentage, but also in absolute value. And it's a key point. The J formula is made to stimulate, the commitment, because the suppliers increase their margin doing that. Without this stimulation, this incentive, I would say that this formula, this pricing methodology, would lose a lot of its value. Second example, maybe more unlucky, so all the cost increase, you can see. So at the end, the total cost increased from 170 to 240. So if you add the expected margin of 50%, normally you should pay 363 euros. And this is not possible due to the European regulation. So public buyer will pay only the agreed price, the price agreed initially. That means only 255 euros. In this case, I would say that the supplier could pay its cost, but not its margin. So it's a bit tricky because it could be a way to make dumping, against its competitor, preventing competitors to enter the market because it's a market without any margin. So it's not a very good situation, even if for the public buyer, it's a good result, and for European Union also, if you take in consideration its regulations. All right. In conclusion, the question becomes, is CPIV addresses European regulation? And not only that, but is effective and efficient process in order to optimize not only the price, but also innovation as such, because it's the aim and the art of IP is to develop successful innovation. We have to remind that. Maybe before discussing this point, I want to explain what are the main concepts, in which CPIV is rooted. The first one, in my opinion, which is the most important, the most key is bounded rationality from Herbert Simon. So innovation raise the question how to decide on something nobody knows. We don't have any figures, any data, any, I would say, the well-known figures, and we have to go on. So, for me, if we are not able through IP to solve, to do better the rationality of all stakeholders involved in the process, we don't, we fail to address the question of how to succeed in innovation, and not only in pricing. The second concept, which is key, and you see it with the previous professor, Mr. Adonai, is risk. How to assess risk. Personally, I am to assess the risk of the innovation at stake, not generally speaking, because one innovation could be not at all risky and another one totally risky, and we don't know before going on. So the fact to include risk within cost and to differentiate them, it's a way to work on the key leverage of a successful innovation. That is to say, to manage risks. And the third one, which is key according to European Union, is opportunism. So it's quite difficult to prevent, a shared opportunism between a buyer and a supplier. And whatever the process, is quite difficult. But we think that the CPIV provide a methodological process which is the body of evidence for European Union. If people, if buyers have a large tender, if they are able to explain how they calculate each cost component, how they negotiate the margin rate, how they manage the price all along the IP steps, and so on, I think it's a way to say, all right, you can check the completion of cost, you can check the market value, and so on. So I think that is the key, I would say, the strengths of CPIV process. And to conclude, I would try to conceptualize this work, saying that price is the counterpart of specification. And it's a key point, specification. So initially, I would say that could be not very high. And all along the innovation path, we want to increase specification until the step where, all right, it's quite difficult to ask for more specification. So the choice of specification is a key decision. But it's difficult to design a specification without including the price path. Sure, the price could be very high, at the beginning because personally, all innovation are not profitable at the initial step. And all along the process, I would say stakeholders try to get a lower price in order to get some margin from the suppliers or to meet the budget initial budget for buyer. So the question is not only for stakeholders, I would say, for buyer, public buyer, and private suppliers, but also for European Union, to be sure that the price is not too high compared to specification. European Union, all right, want to assess that and could be dangerous to take this risk. But on the other side, the price too low to deliver specification is quite difficult to get also, because you have the risk the suppliers will get out innovation and say, all right, it's not at all interesting for us. We are losing money in each IP project. So the aim of all our discussion is to be sure that the two paths, the specification path and the price path, meet at the right point, you know, in order to be sure that the balance between two needs in IP to get innovative specification for a good price is well well managed. All right. I try to stay in the duration. Thank you for your attention, given this quite complex issue. Thank you again to the Grow team, Ivo, Samira, and so on, for their confidence. And I will be glad to answer any question you can add on this subject.
Many thanks, Philippe, for your very, very interesting presentation. So I remind the participants that you can use the Slido link you will find in the chat in order to introduce your questions. In the conclusion of your presentation, you talked a lot about risks. I would like also just to remind the participants that end of April, we have organized a webinar dedicated to risk management in public procurement. I think that if you want to watch it or to rewatch it, it's available on our YouTube channel, and you might also find some links to this very, very interesting presentation. So just before to open the floor to the participants, I have one question. Your methodologies and in the formulas you've presented are pretty, I would say, for more mature suppliers. But when dealing with startups, for example, how we can, even during the pre-tender step, how do we make sure that the startups understand the formula and are ready also to follow it? They might have not the knowledge about the costs, fixed costs. They are very new companies. How do we work with startups to implement your methodology?
Yes, very good question. You know, the formula is simplistic, but in my experience, no one is able to implement it in the same way, you know. So, and especially for not only for startups, but sometimes also for small and medium-sized company, uh, which are in trouble in order to know and manage their own cost, you know. So personally, I think they need some training um, in order to be sure that all suppliers understand the pricing formula the same way, because also you have the problem of assignments of cost. For example, some suppliers assign an expenses to the fixed cost, and other one thinks that is a variable cost. It's quite frequent, you know. And you have also the question of volumes, you know. Often they provide a variable cost included fixed cost by volume. There are some difficulties to make the key difference between fixed cost per unit and variable cost per unit. So yes, I think that to manage something, we have to use the same language, you know. And here we are discussing how to discuss, how to use the same language to discuss something what is key, what is the key point of any relationship in business is price. Yeah, and it's a negotiation in itself, you know. Do we assess price the same way in order to manage the process of innovation the same way? So yes, I think that some training session, previous training session with suppliers and purchaser in order to be sure we are using the same rules in order to set cost and price. Do I answer?
Yes, yes. It's very clear. Thank you very much, Philippe. I don't know if we have any participants who would like to introduce a question. The floor is open. Please use the Slido link. I would like to give the floor to my colleague Ivo, who has also a burning question to ask you, Philippe.
Philippe, many thanks for this very, very interesting presentation and also very clear. Nonetheless, I have let's say two questions. The first one is, my understanding is that one of the assumptions of this approach is open book accounting with the suppliers. Now, it could be that one or more suppliers are hesitant to do that, to apply this methodology because they consider this is part of their business confidentiality. How, let's say, what are the arguments which could be used to convince a supplier to go for open book?
Again, yes, very good question. Yes. So this CPIV is rooted in open book approach. That means something like a GV, you know, a joint venture. We are talking about innovation partnership. So the word partnership has a meaning, you know, is not only something business as usual to buy product on the shelves at the lowest cost. No, we are going together in something which is quite risky, complex, difficult, which is a discovery, you know, the unknown, the uncertainty, and at this step, the trust, the confidence, the quality of relationship is key. We are not, we can't enter, we can commit also in a so difficult journey if we are not able to work together, and we can take this risk, you know. And for me, the ability of the suppliers to practice cooperation, and competition is a key success factor. Maybe sometimes more than its technical ability, which is quite difficult to assess concerning new technology. So yes, for me, it's a sine qua non condition, you know. And the argument is partnership means to share risks and profit. So if you are in trouble, we will try to manage the issue together, not one against the other. You know, I am not saying that because I am, you know, fond of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and thinking that man is good and so on. No, I'm just looking for best practices, and I must say that no innovation can succeed if you have not trust between stakeholders.
Merci, Philippe. Very, very clear also the answer. Sorry, but my question was a little bit provocative, but I think it's important. It is an important topic. I have another small question. If I got it right, let's say the approach that you suggest is about fixing a price in the contract, setting a price, and using the mechanism that you suggest as a pricing review formula. So, first point, whether this understanding is correct. And the second question is, we are now facing, let's say, the price variation is a significant issue in public procurement markets. Nowadays, a number of primary goods are the price has increased a lot, is very volatile. Can this mechanism be used also more generally outside the context of an innovation partnership?
Yes, as a matter of fact, this, as you know, I think that the aim of a price negotiation is not to discuss price, but to discuss pricing, how to calculate price through a pricing formula. So that means that a lot of suppliers and purchasers try to implement indexation clause, you know, indexation clause. That means a price formula included the different components of cost and integrating their variation. All right. What is quite interesting is to see the difference in the ability to manage together the price change move from the top higher price and the down together between countries and industries. For example, in Japan, when we compare the way to manage together the price variation between suppliers and buyers, in Japan, they succeed in, I would say, lower this move together in order to minimize, the price variation. They were pushed to do that because previously the yen increased tremendously faced with dollar, and they have to manage a tremendous increase in their purchasing cost. But you have some other countries where the relationship between buyers and suppliers are rooted in arm's length, where it's, I would say, it's a battle fire, and we are living that today, and happily. That means that the contract are broken, invoking the clause, sorry, I don't know in English, cas de force majeure, yes. How would you say that in English, force majeure?
I think it's the same, the French words are used also in English.
All right, force majeure. And sometimes, and more than sometimes, this force majeure is fully artificial. So the arm's length is very strong. So personally, the first point is that this variation has to be managed within a funnel, no more than, no less than. First thing, that means that the supplier has to cover himself his risk, and it's completely it's possible, using the market tools to cover the variation of the cost of the oil, whatever, the copper, and so on. And second thing, which is much more important, is that if you want to index his price on the cost variation, he has to include a productivity clause. Because it's the aim of any companies, any enterprise, to get productivity, whatever the price variation. And it's this famous G, and so it's a bargain. I accept to index my price on the purchasing price of the supplier, but he has to accept to commit itself in productivity gains.
Many thanks, Philippe, again for your very interesting answer about how also to implement your methodology, not only for innovation and partnership, and again, because this burning, I would say, moment we are living here today with this price increasing and problems public buyers are facing with their contract. I don't know if we have any questions coming from the audience. I see no questions pending on the Slido application. If maybe either your presentation was crystal clear and people are ready to implement it, which I doubt, or if you are shy, so please don't be, and introduce your question. We still have some time. I have one more linked to the topic of management. As you know, public buyers do not often have the skills or even the knowledge to implement this kind of methodology. I would like to ask you if you could give some tips to our audience in order to help them, I would say, start implementing your methodology.
Yes. In order to assess cost, you have on one side, we need some technical people, all right, because they are able to say, all right, if we choose this kind of technical solution, the cost could be this one, and if we use this other technical solution, the cost will be W. So yes, but personally, my opinions show that often technical people try to choose technical solutions without integrating the cost component, especially during the R&D steps. So it's a key point to say, all right, whatever the technical solution you can choose, you have immediately to assess its cost. So the answer is the buyer. I'm not the answer, you know. He is just here to ask for questions, to ask these questions to technical people on the supplier side as well as internally, saying, all right, if you are making this technical choice, the cost could be the following one. Sure, another resources is needed to do that, and that is controller. You know. Good or bad, you have people within companies whose job is only to calculate cost. And the way they are doing that is quite strange, very, very heterogeneous and surprising. So personally, for example, I was previously a price manager in charge of key accounts, and I have to negotiate with a controller because they say, oh no, we can sell this product at this lowest price. No, it's possible. Look at my Excel sheet, you know, we are losing money. So I say, all right, could you explain what you put in your Excel sheet, please? And I discover, you know, that everybody overestimate its cost in order to be sure to get the right KPIs, you know, and to show that they are able to do savings. So really, as a matter of fact, purchaser and helped by their own controller as to set, I would say, a common methodology of cost assessment in order to be sure that we are able to compare what is comparable. You know. Again, the key point for the buyer is not to do that himself, but to push technical people and controller to answer its question. Are you sure that the fixed cost will be this one? And explain me why. All right, and the volume, tell me what volume and explain me why. And after that, it presents, you know, these results to, I would say, the buying team, saying, all right, what do you think about? And personally, I think that, yeah, it's convincing. Here, it's not at all convincing. Yeah, we can say, all right, it's a good target cost and so on. It just, I would say, in a position to coordinate this this collective work. Do I answer your question?
Yes, yes. We have a question from Carlos Garcia. I suggest that, Carlos, you take the floor. Please open your mic and your camera and ask directly your question to Philippe Portier.
Thank you so much. Okay, I will try to do so. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for the excellent presentation. Yeah, I was just wondering whether this methodology, which clearly emphasizes the best price per value approach, could be used in such contexts wherein quality is not properly determined due to, let's say, some technical difficulties or whatsoever. So in this case, in order to determine the best quality price ratio, could this methodology be also applied?
You know, in my opinion, yes, this methodology is a generic one, you know, it's not really specific to IP. But the question is it useful taking into account the issue you have to manage, you know? If the risk is bureaucracy, you know, is to complexify something which is simple. But if you have to face with something which is very complex, it could help to simplify this complexity, you know? So I would say the main criteria to say, all right, I use or not this methodology is what is the issue I have to solve. If the issue is we have to produce together savings because something is wrong on the, you know, on the productive system, on the cost system, yes, it's very useful to use the methodology. But if the price is given, you know, by the price market and so on, and the product is fully mature and so on, this is not useful to implement such complex approach. So they are not generic and universal methodology. We have to choose our tool depending on the problem. So, do I address your question?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Many thanks, Carlos, for your question. I don't know if the other participants have any comments to make on this methodology. We're very, very interested by your feedback, also in order to improve maybe the next presentation for the next masterclass. We still have, let's say, 30 seconds. Okay, so if not, I will just conclude the masterclass just by sharing information about the next masterclass, which will be about, sorry, I just want to make it, more up. About another methodology presented by Professor Servajean-Hirst, another French, and his methodology is about estimating and negotiating approaches. I'm sorry, I just have and about other events and webinars we're organizing in this month of June. We have the next lunchtime talk on work conditions, which will be held on the 16th June, so next week. And as you know, maybe or not, we have launched a new newsletter in order really to share new information, events, funding information about funding opportunities, or even project where you could participate. Please use the link if you want to subscribe and to follow our activity. And to stay connected, we have two LinkedIn groups, one dedicated to innovation procurement, which is Agents of Innovation Procurement, and the other one about social procurement, Actors for Social Impact Procurement. And if you want to watch or rewatch all our webinars and all our videos, please connect to our YouTube channel, and do not hesitate to make also comments about our videos. We are really interested by your feedback in order really to improve the quality of what we are trying to do. And I would like really to thank all our team members, and especially Sylvia and Marie, who helped me and Ivo to prepare this masterclass. Philippe, thank you for your very interesting presentation. I would like also to just to precise that the studies and your study are available on our webpage. We will certainly share the link with the video to this masterclass, and do not hesitate to share with your networks this video and the link to the presentation and to the YouTube channel. Okay, thank you, and have a good lunch. Bye-bye.
Thank you.